discuss, because the idea here we are going to look at different aspects here. But the idea is that you have to understand that in terms of the coverage by the media gets affected. And it can affect your perception also, depending on what it gives priority or what it refuses to give priority. We'll try as much as possible to be balanced. But it's very tricky because much of the media control is on one side. I don't want to say which side. So much of the time that the message you get is highly influenced by one side, and that affects your perception of how you understand the conflict. Because depending on who controls the means of the media, then controls the dialogue that you're going to have.
Which media?
I'm talking about the Western media.
Okay.
When you look at the Western media, I don't want to say that sometimes it's pro-Israel in terms of a conflict. So if you get to watch that media more and more, you are going to form a perception that maybe this is what is right, this is what is wrong, or this is the cause of the conflict, or this is how it's supposed to be solved. Now, maybe there are questions why we are focusing on the American media. But the aspect is that American media tends to inform the discourse upon which other media in the world tend to look at the Palestinian and Middle East conflict. In other words, I say you might be in Japan, you might be in Africa, but maybe the story you read about the Middle East will come from New York Times as a syndicate story, or maybe it might come from BBC or Al Jazeera. So the question is, what you find here that is being consumed by the American audience is also to a certain extent being consumed by others, and that informs your perception of how the conflict goes. But now, having said that, now I want to move to some of the points that we are going to look at that tends what you hear much of the time and how that affects you. And you look at the conflict in terms of the way it has been covered, is that conflict is dodged by allegations and bias from both sides, each accusing each other. And what the person is found in the middle is a journalist. Either the Palestine or the Israel will accuse you of bias. But at the same time, you're working for a certain media house. More complaints of partisan reporting than any other news topic. Of all the topics that you get across in this world, this is the one that as a journalist you face most of the complaints, or that you are partisan. Even if you are trying to dig out the truth, you are accused of being partisan. And the further you go in terms of the truth, the more partisans you are accused of, depending on which side you come from. The other is that bias in print, and how does it manifest itself? One of them is dictation. Use of emotive words. That sometimes you meet across them in the newspaper, you read them. Maybe the one or two words, but you don't know about them, but they have an impact in you. And what happened with those emotive words that they prejudice your perception from the word go, but you not notice them much of the time. One of them is disputed territories versus occupied territories. One media will refer as disputed territories, the other one as occupied territories. Depending on which one you consume most, it will form your perception of the debate. The other one is about neighborhood and settlement. Which one do you get most of the time? Between neighborhood and settlement, because it indicates if you are in settlement or neighborhood. Reflect different position and perception. These ones reflect different position and perception. So as a journalist, the one that you choose can determine from which side you can report conflict tomorrow. Because if you are the person who goes with disputed territories, then there are areas you cannot stand and report from. If you go with occupied territories, then there are areas that you can stand and report from. And this is one that we usually deal with much of the time. Security, fence, and apartheid wall. In South Africa, we went with this word. Is that the case? But in this conflict, one side says it's a security wall. But this is a security wall, this is a security wall. Let us go to this building. When I put a wall here, I exclude you, or I lock you in. But when I put a security fence, we can negotiate. So when the media uses these two words now, security fence and apartheid wall, this word is very sensitive to use when it comes to this conflict. But this one, you can use it. But there are some, if you are in Palestine area, then this one becomes more favorable for you as a journalist. But you cross the border, you come here and use this one. Retaliation. We are looking at the question of retaliation. This is the one that you get much of the time, that Palestine or Israel are retaliating. And you look at this study that was done by American Organization of Fairness and Accuracy, is that between September 2000 and 2002, you look at CBS, ABS, and NBC, The word retaliation was used on 150 occasions. Out of those, 75% were in reference to Israel. 9% were in reference to Palestine. So if I give you the right that you are retaliating, then it means another person becomes the aggressor in terms of that dynamic. Because when I tell you I'm retaliating, a party is retaliating, then you ask, who is the aggressor?